So first off, thank you everyone for having me. This is Tricia McCannon in Atlanta, Georgia, and I know I'm speaking to people all over the world because Neil has a very international reach in his wonderful Portal to Ascension programs. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a lot of different levels of Atlantis, and so hold on to your hats as we begin to look at Atlantis and discovering that lost civilization. So the first question we want to ask, since Atlantis is not in our traditional history books, is have there been earlier ages of the earth that we know little or nothing about? And of course, that's what we've been talking about this entire weekend. There's Lemuria, Atlantis, Oceania, and some of these earlier cultures. These are earlier civilizations that persist in legend, and the legends do not seem to vanish, despite the fact that the traditional scientific community likes to deny them. So we're going to be talking today specifically about Atlantis, which was the last of these great civilizations, and of course predated or came after and also overlapped Lemuria and Oceania, which were earlier civilizations. So our ancestors understood that basically our entire universe is wrapped up in cycles within cycles, and these cycles help to determine human consciousness. This is the Mayan Hunab Ku, and as we see the Tree of Life here, this is such a beautiful painting that represents this / the galactic equator, and our crossing through it, and how for half of what is called the Great Year, we are literally in, let us say, a state of more enlightenment. And for half of the Great Year, we are in a state of less enlightenment. So this is a very large 26,000 year cycle that we're going to be talking about. And it is called the precession of the equinox. And it's determined, as we're going to see, by the position of what is irradiating our solar system and our planet in alignment with the sun, which is the central vortex through which we receive light and information. So let's explain it. Here is the wheel of the ecliptic. What is the ecliptic? It's the flat plate that all the planets go around, just like a record player. It's a 7-degree band in the heavens. And while there are constellations above us and below us, the ones that are on this flat plate are what we call the zodiac. And in any age that we have, let's say we've been in the age of Pisces, we're moving into the age of Aquarius now, what occurs is, from our point of view on the Earth, when we look at the celestial backdrop of the sun, whatever that backdrop is the age that we are moving through. So in this particular depiction, this would be the sign of Virgo. Okay, and opposite that sign, of course, is the other sign. So Virgo and Pisces, for example, are opposite energies. And during the course of a specific age, which is around 2160 years, about 1,000 years into that cycle, not only does the energy of the major dominating sign come in, but the balancing energy also comes in. So we've been in the age of Pisces, the age of the fish that was heralded by the appearance of Jesus 2,000 years ago. But around 1,000 years ago, the honoring of the divine feminine began to return very slowly to our planet through the Kabbalah, through the worship of the marionette or the divine feminine, the great troubadours of love that raged throughout Europe. And so it's sort of a subcurrent. Where we're moving now is we're going to be moving, of course, into the age of Aquarius, which is actually right over here. And the opposite sign to Aquarius, of course, is Leo, the lion here. So this is sort of the Son of God energy, and this is the pouring down of knowledge from the higher realms. This is another depiction where you can see very clearly from the Earth, when we look at the celestial backdrop, what would have been this age. This would have been the age of Taurus, which was from around, about 4400 BC to around 2150 BC, someplace in that time period. And this is a fixed earth energy where a lot of the pyramids were being built and going up, a lot of the structures that have continued to remain on the planet despite earthquakes and tidal floods and all sorts of other things. So each one of these 12 astrological ages last for around 2160 years. In truth, some of the constellations are fatter and some of them are skinnier. The age of Aries, for example, is skinnier. It's a little narrower. And so it officially it should have come in around 2200 BC, but it was probably more like 2100 that it came in, and it ended around the time that Jesus came. And so now we have the age of Pisces that we've been in for quite some time. Each one of these ages, if you take a 360-degree circle and you divide it by 12, is roughly 30 degrees fat or 30 degrees wide. And it takes 72 years. This is how slow this moves for us to progress 1 degree. So the Theosophists tell us that we entered the age of Aquarius at 0 degrees of Aquarius in 1939. If you add 1939 and you add 72 years, that takes us to 2011. So 2012 would have been the very first year of the 30 degrees of the 72 years of moving into 1 degree of Aquarius. Now you can sort of see Pisces is a fat sign. So we're right here. We're kind of right on the edge, or maybe we're like right here, where we're right between Pisces and Aquarius. So it's a very slow movement. And if you look back from 1939 to now, and you see what kind of changes we've had in the world, it gives you a clue to where we're going for this next 2160-year phase. And you can see the math here, 30 degrees per sign times 72 years for every degree equals roughly 2160 years for every year. And if you multiply that by 12 zodiac signs, you have the 25,920-year cycle, which is considered the great year. So it creates a very slow, gradual shift over time in the cosmic energies that are flowing into our planet. And it's not only bathing our planet, it's bathing all the planets in our solar system with these cosmic energies. So these astrological ages actually create an electromagnetic energy field. And this field then bathes the solar system and bathes the sun, and it transforms the energetic field that's coming out of the sun. So many of you may have begun to feel like you were receiving light codes from the sun. And this is true because light programs matter. Light informs the DNA with information and programming, literally changing the consciousness and even maybe the genetics of the people on the planet. So this affects our entire cellular DNA, global, and human consciousness. And so the rules of engagement for the evolving soul that's come to Earth change as each age changes. And of course, we can awaken and become masterful in any age, but some ages are easier to do it in than others. This is the glyph for Aquarius. And what do we see here? We see the pouring down of knowledge from the stars. And of course, what are we experiencing? In the last 70 years, we're experiencing a whole lot of UFOs and ETs and star knowledge, a lot of information. Aquarius is an air age, which is information. So in the last 100 years, we've gone from the telegraph to the telephone, to the television, to the fax machine, to the computer, to the cell phone. So we are to the microchip, to just accelerated information. And we are just in the beginning of this. So it's going to be space travel. It's going to be contact with our star brothers and sisters. It's going to be people channeling and bringing in information from these higher realms. But Aquarius is also the only age that's ruled by 2 elements, not only the element of air, but the element of ether. And ether, of course, is, let us say, of the 5 elements, air, earth, fire, water, ether is closest to spirit. So this is one of the reasons why the good news is we're moving into a very high consciousness place within our galactic spin. Each age gives the souls that incarnate on that planet, it gives rise to different empires, different ways of thinking, different philosophies, different theologies, and different opportunities for spiritual growth. And we have stories, of course, of previous ages where it seems like there were different kinds of beings down here. For example, here's one with looks like a half snake, half human with, wings. I mean, where do we get that? How about the centaurs and the fawns? Do we really think all this was mythical? traditional history would say so, because they don't have any evidence. And even if they did have evidence, they would want to conceal it. So centaurs, fauns, no, let's not talk about them. Let's not even talk about fairies. Now, these are photographs taken by a British gentleman in England, and certainly there's beings at many, many different levels, not only in the physical and the astral and the mental and the causal and the spiritual planes, but every one of these planes has 7 subdivisions. So even within our physical plane, the fairies do exist, but at a different sub-level. So most of us don't see them. But the veils between the worlds are becoming very thin right now, which is really one of the exciting things, because a lot of these things that traditional hardcore science has tried to totally dismiss are being blown away by some of the evidence that we're seeing. We also, of course, I'm one of the people very much involved in forbidden archaeology. And fortunately, there are other wonderful researchers out there as well. This is actually a footprint in stone of obviously a very, very big being. And here is a cowboy sitting with the skeleton of a gigantic being, probably a 21-footer, encased in a wall. And there have been other beings on this planet, entirely different eras, whether they originally came down from different star systems to inhabit the planet, or whether they were indigenous to this planet. We also have a lot of anomalies all over the planet, giving rise to things like these gigantic 50-ton megalithic monuments that even today we could not replicate. And we ourselves would not know how to move these stones. We might try to push them down and destroy them, which some crazy people certainly have done, but we could not replicate these kinds of places. And of course, they're aligned mathematically with the rising of the sun, the moon, the equinoxes, the solstices, and the Saros cycle of the nodes within the planet. So this tells us that there was once a time when there were advanced civilizations that were aware of astronomy, mathematics, sacred geometry, and some kind of engineering that was able to move and construct these stones. So thus we have legends really of these fabled lands like Atlantis and Lemuria and Mu that we are trying to put together. And speakers like the ones that have been on there this weekend, and people like myself and perhaps even Michael, who was just speaking, who we are time walkers who are able to travel the time track. So we've been able to go back and see some of these things, and then we look to find the physical scientific evidence for it. So these are stories of ancient times of gods and goddesses and star beings and crystal cities and crystal technology that, of course, we've just come into in the last few decades. And empires, entire empires, stories of magic. I love those stories. And it's because as a collective, there's a part of us that knows that this stuff is possible, even though we don't know how to access it today. And it's because at one time we had more, let us say, spiritual knowledge, vibrational awareness, and more access to this. But of course, whenever that happens, you may have, 95% of the people who are using it in a good way, but all it takes is that, 5 to 10% that misuse it, and they can use it in such a way that it begins to enslave the population. So some of these gifts were deactivated for us long ago. All of this creates a vast star clock in the heavens that basically governs our consciousness, eventually bringing us back to the same energetic point in time if we wait long enough, which takes, I think, about 240 million years. That'd be a long time to be incarnating on any one planet for us to travel all the way around the galaxy. And this means, of course, that time and space move in these great cycles and these great whirling dances in the heavens. And we can observe these cycles within cycles all around us. They are not only in the heavens, but they're in the microcosm as well as the macrocosm. We see it on the unfurling of the way our hair unfurls in our head, the unfurling of leaves and flowers and roses and pine cones. This is, of course, called the Fibonacci spiral, or the golden mean spiral. And it is the unfolding or unfurling of the divine power, the one that becomes the two, the divine Father and Mother, that becomes the three, the first Trinity, that becomes the five, which includes the divine daughter and son principles that we know very little about in this day and age. We can also see it in the structure of all the organic worlds of nature, in the spinning of the planets around the suns, in the movement of the galaxies. But it not only exists at a spiritual level, it's also at a metaphysical or higher level. In fact, many other visionaries, this is from Dante's Inferno, have seen these circles within circles in the spiritual realms. And this is a beautiful painting by the mystic painter William Blake, who, by the way, you may not know, but he was a 33-degree Mason and the head of the Masonic order in Britain during the 1800s. And he, of course, describes this beautiful serpentine-like movement and the movement up towards heaven. So these repeat at higher and lower octaves because this is the energy that turns the universe. You know, we could say that the Divine Mother literally is the entire visible universe. You know, we're literally swimming in the body of the Divine Mother, but what's turning it is that Divine Father energy, which is that spiral, the wings of the eagle, that spiral of creation. Now, when we look back in time on Earth, the Hopi Indians, who of course been great timekeepers, as well as the Mayans and some of the other ancient civilizations, they tell us that there have been 4 previous ages or worlds. In the first age, we were destroyed by fire. Now, was that the meteor that hit the Yucatan 65 million years ago? It could have been that one, but I'm sure there have been other times that we've been hit by asteroids and it's created, fires. But that was, of course, a worldwide darkening where there would have been an ending of an age. And then by ice, we know that there have been these great ice ages that have covered the planet from time to time, and that the poles have shifted. For example, in the Great Lakes in America, they were there at one time, and they've been in many different places throughout the ages. And then third is by the Great Flood, and most of us know that because of the biblical stories that came from the Sumerian that went to the Chaldean as the Enumad Elish. And the Jews did not really get that until they were in captivity in Babylon around 570 to 522 BC. That's when they first learned those stories of the flood and later incorporated them into the Old Testament. So in total, the Hopis tell us that there will be 7 ages. So where does that put us? The first 3 worlds are complete. And according to them, we are now coming to the end of that 4th cycle. Does it have to be worldwide destruction? It does not. Obviously, we have to start again if it's worldwide destruction, as we did with Atlantis. And many times we lose our memory because of that. I think we're into the star beings are hoping for evolution this time, not destruction. And so I think we're at a place of having a choice. The good news is that this next world that is coming, which is called the 5th world of illumination. So this is going to put us into this higher frequency octave where people begin to wake up to the fact that we are immortal souls that have human bodies, that we're down here in Earth School, and that we can actually create a planet of beauty and bliss, peace and harmony. We can let the remedial souls that are still committed to violence, war, and conflict, and abuse and addiction, we can let those souls move on to another planet to continue their life lessons. But if enough of us awaken in this time, that wave of consciousness can be realized in a real genuine way. And this is, of course, what programs like this are about and what Portal to Ascension is about. So this is why most of us who've been listening to this program today and speaking do the work that we do. According to the Hopi prophecy, there is a 6th world called the world of prophecy and revelation, and a 7th world called the world of completion. And of course, how long these worlds are, is it going to be one 26,000-year cycle or 4 or 6? We don't really know. But we do know that when we look back at Atlantis, we can see demarcation points where there were changes even in the continuance of Atlantis, even though the societies changed. Gosh, we've got thunder and lightning going on here, so let's just hope we don't lose our connection. If we do, Neil, you're going to have to call me or call me on the phone. Okay. So ascending and descending.
Tricia, really quick, I missed that. If what happened, say it again.
There's thunder and lightning here, and I'm just praying I don't lose my internet connection. I unplugged the phone we were talking on before, so you would call me on my cell phone, and I know you know the number. Okay, so hopefully we won't. But so let's consider explain how this works. You know, just like we have a sine wave with our brain waves and our heartbeat that goes up and down, this is the Shekinah or the breath of God. It's the daughter principle. So just as everything moves in a spiral, the divine father energy, the divine mother energy, divine daughter energy is the carrier wave upon which the Holy Spirit travels. So consequently, we don't just have, it's not just like a, you know, an uphill climb and we reach a plateau and that's it. Everything moves in cycles, including human consciousness, trends in fashion, waves in the ocean, heartbeats, breaths, brain waves. It all moves in this up and down cycle. So does time. So the ancients tell us that there are 4 major yugas or ages. The largest one is called the Sattva Yuga, okay, or the Golden Age. Then there's the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. In each age, we begin to fall asleep, okay, as we're going down in the cycle. And then as we begin to come up in the cycle, we begin to awaken. We begin to remember who we are. We begin to remember lost knowledge, and so forth. So each one of these ages performs a different function. We have been, you know, the different people have different opinions, but one version of reality is that we've been in the Iron Age or the Kali Yuga for 5,000 years. That's really a long time. However, there are cycles within cycles. So I think that we actually are someplace right now in the Silver Age, perhaps within the Iron Age. In other words, we've been moving up from the time of the Renaissance about 500 years ago. We began to move into the Bronze Age. We're someplace in the Silver Age now. There's still people that are still in the Bronze Age in their consciousness, but there are many people that have woken up. And there's some people who have maybe even begun to jump over into the Golden Age in the cycle within a much larger cycle. So one of the things that's interesting about this is the length of the cycles. The good news is that the Kali Yuga or the Dark Age is the shortest. So let's just say it's 1 unit long, whatever that unit is. The Bronze Age is 2 units long, so it's twice as long. The Silver Age is 4 units long, so it's twice as long. And finally, the Golden Age, thank goodness, is 8 units long. So that's the good news, is that there have been times when we've hit much higher, longer ages in consciousness. But each one of these are defined in different ways. But just like the sine wave, we can see it going up like this and coming back down. And you're going to see how this plays out in the actual movement of our solar system through the galaxy. So the Kali Yuga is said to be an instinctive state of mind. In other words, you know, what I call the 4 Fs: feeding, fighting, fleeing, and fornicating. Okay, it's like living from the primitive, more, you know, gut level. Just think of the Bubba guy who's punching people out in the bar, who's gone to, you know, get fed, get laid, and you know, have a fight with somebody. There are definitely people that are still at that level, but many people have moved up into the Bronze Age, which is more an intellectual or scientific frame of mind. And this is one of the things we see with the Renaissance, where science began to come back in. It had been suppressed for a long time by religion, and it had to separate itself from religion for a really long time in order to be allowed to exist, because religion has such a strong hold over people. And now, of course, there are people like Aaron Laszlo and Michio Kaku, who are quantum physicists that are remarrying the spiritual, multidimensional, cosmological view of reality to the scientific. And bravo, it's wonderful. That pulls us into the silver state of mind. The silver consciousness is kind of like what we see, let's say, in the New Age movement, people tuning in, meditating, being inspired, bringing through spiritual wisdom or knowledge, activating their healing gifts, opening up to channeling, opening up to clairvoyance or clairaudience or clairsentience. This is all, lovely. And as we can see, we've sort of been in this now. Probably in the 1960s, it really started coming in. Although there were wonderful mystics in the late 1800s, Madame Blavatsky, the Theosophical movement, Manly P. Hall in the early 20th century, Alice Bailey. There definitely have always been mystics, but less than there are now. A lot of the people who are pursuing this now don't necessarily have a structural yardstick for this, because the great spiritual mystery schools got destroyed. There are still some around, and I actually am involved with heading up and bringing a lot of this very grounded ancient information through my Phoenix Fire Mystery School, and also through something called the Way of Truth, mysteryschool.org, and you can certainly check it out on your own time if you want to, and see if it's something that resonates with you. It's a path that has been brought down to the planet by masters, and so it's about making that conscious connection with the masters for yourself. The sattva state of mind is one in which we know that we are souls. There's no question. At the bottom level, we're just, everything's just the physical world. At the intellectual, we're trying to figure out if we're physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. At the intuitive, we begin to realize we're spiritual beings that have a mind and emotions and a body and all these things we have to juggle. But when we reach this state, we really have made that connection with our divine self and with the creator, and there's no question. So this is another map for looking at how this moves through time, and how the center of the galaxy goes. When we are aligned with the center of the galaxy is when we are in the golden age. And over time, we become out of alignment. So we have been living, or so they say, in the Iron Age or the Kali Yuga until the time of the Renaissance, when we begin to climb out. And I think in the 20th century, the latter half, we begin to climb out into the Silver Age. And all of us are a part of that shift in consciousness on the planet. Now, since these ages are around 26,000 years long, and Atlantis went down, or 25,920, around 12,000 years ago, it went down in the middle of one of the ages, or halfway through that great year. And we want to take a look at how this works. When we go around the center of the galaxy, we don't go around like a flat plate, like a record player. We move in a sine wave, just like everything. We go below the galactic equator. We come up, we align with the center, even though we're still 2/3 of the way out from the middle of the galaxy. And then we go above the galactic equator. So this is actually where we are right now, which is very, very exciting. When Atlantis went down, it went down in the age of Leo, and we're going to see some evidence for that. There are 4 fixed ages that are really important that we want to talk about. And these are Leo the lion, Aquarius that we're moving into. The bottom here is Taurus, and at the top, and bottom and top is a relative term, isn't it? Because, it's in outer space, is Scorpio. Now, Scorpio would not seem like it would be the most ascended sign, but the truth is that the entire initiatic path is contained within Scorpio, from the lowest to the low, who misuses their power, to those who don't want to misuse their power and avoid it, to those who have realized that true empowerment is connection with the divine, to those who have become the phoenix or the Christed being who comes to bring their song of beauty to the world and realizes that even though the mortal body dies, they in fact are immortal as souls. And so Scorpio can be a very, very high sign as well. This is another map for looking at where we are. When we hit 2012, it was that very first year of 72 years of 1 degree into Aquarius. And we actually entered what's called the mouth of the serpent, because our galaxy, let's just see if I can kind of go back and show you. Our galaxy has this, oh, I think it's in a future one. It has almost like a dark rift that looks like a serpent's mouth. It's really, really interesting. Now, this is another way of looking at how the poles shift over time. If you think of the pole of our planet as if it was an antenna, let's say the television station's right here, when the antennas align with the TV station, we're getting a really clear signal. We remember that we're divine beings and this is the golden age, we're awake. But when the antenna moves a little out of alignment, we get some static. And when it moves more out of alignment, we get more static. And finally, when it really moves out of alignment, we fall asleep, okay? So here we have been with the pole star Polaris. 2000 BC, it was Thuban in the constellation Draco, the dragon. You can see this is at the top of the North Pole. These are the circumpolar stars. Slowly, we're going to move over here, okay? And then 12,000 years from here, we're going to be aligned with Lyra. And Lyra was known as the harp of God. And the image is really an eagle holding a harp. And it's very close to being aligned with the center of the galaxy. Here's Cygnus the swan. And Cygnus is also very important. It looks like a cross. And there have been some huge, let's say, solar mass ejections or supernovas that have erupted in the Cygnus system. In fact, during one of the last great golden ages of Atlantis from 16,050 to about 14,000 years ago, there was a huge eruption in Cygnus. And right now there is one as well. So there's something very important about Cygnus the swan. So here is that antenna. So here the antenna is pointing towards the pole star of Polaris, which is really pointing away from the center of the galaxy. But over time, it shifts to Vega, the brightest star in Lyra. And at this point, we are much more awake. And so you can sort of see this is the flat plate of the ecliptic, okay? And this is, of course, this is the current inclination of the Earth, which is 23.4 degrees. And this is how our poles are aligned. So it's a really complicated thing to understand if you don't have satellite imagery and you can't get into outer space. And this is why it's taken scientists in the last few centuries a long time to figure it out. So as this happens, we either move into or out of alignment with this galactic center. And here we see the dark rift. Here's the Milky Way galaxy, and there's this kind of dark rift in the middle where it looks like we're kind of in the mouth of the snake. Here we see Draco over here, and we recognize Lyra, which is kind of close to that. Here's Cygnus the swan that we just looked at, looking like a cross. Aquila, the great eagle, representing the divine father. Delphinus, the dolphin, representing the son of God. Apollo and Horus were linked to Delphinus. And Hercules, this represents again an earlier incarnation of the solar lords that came to inspire humanity. So we're kind of in the dark rift now, which is, exciting. But it takes about 1,000 years for us to pass through this. And this, shifting of the ages is important. Now, these 4 ages that I talked about that are so powerful are the 4 fixed ages in astrology. In astrology, of the 12 signs, there's 4 elements: air, earth, fire, water. Each one of the 3 air, 3 earth, 3 fire, 3 water signs has 1 fixed age, 1 cardinal age, which means likes to initiate things, and 1 mutable age, which means adaptable, can go with the flow. The fixed ages are really important, and you can see I've marked them here with Scorpio and Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo. Now, and of course, we see them in all these stained glass windows in cathedrals. And of course, we're told, these are the 4 apostles, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. The church took all this information and then they overlaid their own theology on top of it obscuring the real meaning. But this was known by the ancients. It was known by the Egyptians and by the East Indians and by the Persians, by the Sumerians and the Chaldeans, by the Druids. This was knowledge held within the Great Mystery School. So here we have, the eagle, which is the high end of Scorpio, and opposite Taurus, the bull, with wings, beautiful. And here's Leo, the lion, with wings, illuminated, the son of God energy. It's the only sign overseen by the sun, and Aquarius. But, and here we see it actually on the map, okay? So why? Because again, this is when we cross the galactic equator, Leo and Aquarius, and the bottom point and the high point, Scorpio and Taurus. So what happens during these 4 fixed ages? Well, that's the $24,000 question, isn't it? We are entering one of these ages so we can begin to observe what's happening. The stargates open. Basically, we have the star brothers and sisters coming back because the ability to travel across vast distances has suddenly increased. We have the reactivation of sacred sites, and these are places that I've gone to, and many of you may have gone to too. I've taken groups to Egypt and Peru and England and Italy and Poland and places in America and South America and Central America. And I know that this is one of the exciting things that Neil and Joni are doing. And both of them are just such beautiful high beings. So if you guys decide to go with them on a trip, great. If for some reason you can't go, in a year or so, I'll be probably back out there doing some of this. But this is real important work for light workers, because not only do you yourself get activated, but many times we're in those spaces in order to, over the last 20 or 30 years, clear aberrant energies that have polluted the site. And then these are like, let's say, vortexes, that if you go in the right time, in the right place, with the right consciousness, can open up doorways of consciousness for you. So one of the things that also happens during these ages, particularly the age of Aquarius that we're moving into, is a quickening and a change, not only in consciousness, but a change in the earth. Sometimes this is physical, like we're seeing climate changes with wildfires and floods and earthquakes and droughts. And this is all because the poles are shifting and also because of global warming. So that's a very big conversation. But one of the other things that can happen during these ages is we begin to remember who we are. And this is one of the things that's happening with all of you. You're waking up to the fact that, you are loved, you are gifted, you are worthy, you are a multi-dimensional being that's functioning at many levels. So it's also a time, particularly now, when we start to regather some of our memories. And I want to give some credit to Dom and Her, who I happen to love in Italy, that they have, the timeline when Atlantis fell was fractured. And they've done a lot of work in putting this timeline back together at an energetic level, so that a lot of the discoveries that I'm going to be showing you in pictures that prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that these ancient sophisticated cultures were once here, those discoveries could be made and found so that we could find the evidence for the rediscovery of Atlantis. And you're going to be seeing a lot of those images today. So it's more than just legend. It actually becomes a reality. So was there an Atlantis? That's, of course, the very big question. And if you've been sitting on this conference by now, you probably know that there was. But a lot of scientific people do not want to believe that there was, because it's not on the nightly news. So we want to take a look at what we know about it. And in this image, it looks like it's in the Atlantic, past the Straits of Gibraltar, which is exactly what Plato said, and that it was some kind of a big landmass. And actually, it should have been, in this drawing, it should have been bigger than this, because it's described as the same size as North Africa and another part of the world. And we'll come to that in a little bit. So we want to take a little look at any proof that we had that Atlantis actually existed. To do that, we want to kind of look back a little bit in time and see that there's been some interesting maps that have appeared showing Atlantis, in fact, in the Atlantic Ocean. And this is actually what the sea plateaus, the tectonic plates also show us. There does appear that at one time there was a lot of travel also to South America and Central America, and that Central America looked quite different before sea levels rose. And oh yeah, let me just go back a second. And also that Lemuria, and some call this Mu. Mu could have been Lemuria, or it could have been slightly different, but close to it, was in the Pacific Ocean. So certainly there was a time when we had other land masses above water. This is another map from a 17th century German Jesuit scholar, and this is a little more accurate. If you, I'm going to show you a map that Esperidae may have shown you with Dominaher that I think is the most accurate. But this is, of course, where the Mid-Atlantic Ridge would come, and then there were islands connected to it. So now some people have speculated this in Antarctica, and there is no doubt that Antarctica was inhabited by sophisticated, probably extraterrestrial civilization before it was covered in ice. But it was not where Atlantis was. This is an ancient map from 1513 called the Piri Reis map, named after a Turkish admiral and cartographer, that shows accurately the contours of Antarctica as it would be seen from the air if it was not covered by ice. And now that we have satellite sonar, we now know that this is very accurate. So Antarctica is a very big subject, and I have whole presentations on Antarctica because, believe me, I could talk about it for 2 or 3 hours. And actually, I think I've done some for Neil, and maybe he'll have a conference on it again. But basically, it was discovered in recent times in the 1700s by Captain James Cook. And there was a map that appeared earlier from the 1500s, again, showing this continent that is Antarctica. Down in the South Pole. And as the ice melts now on one part of Antarctica, we have over 7 different countries down there who have vying for position because they've discovered under the 3-mile ice sheet, basically a hidden city. And the city is still, the batteries are still on, the energy system is near Lake Vostok. And they've also discovered, as the snow melts, these pyramids. And you can see, it looks like a pyramid to me, and this one too. Here we are again with what appear to be pyramids. So there was a very advanced civilization. This is from the aerial view. This is the Pyramid of Giza looking straight down on it. And this is one of those pyramids, and it's looking pretty much like a big old pyramid to me. So there was a lost civilization there that was quite sophisticated, that had energy, power, astronomy, astrology. Some of the extraterrestrial Anunnaki were down there for sure, because their planet, when it comes around, comes from the southern hemisphere. So they would be the first, let's say, observatory to be able to see it coming. There is also an opening in both the North and the South poles. And if you just think about it, this is centrifugal force. If you rotate a top fast enough continually, it throws the matter out to the outside. So planets are, generally speaking, hollow. If they rotate, they're hollow. And most planets have an inner sun or an inner core. If the inner sun has died or gone out, the planet has died. It's the heart of the planet. And so there is a very, very advanced inner Earth civilization. And again, we don't really have time to talk about it in this presentation because I have a lot to cover, but they have been holding the light at a very, very high level for a very long time. And this is where the legends of Shambhala and Agartha come from. And it's a very peaceful civilization, but we've had star beings come and go from this through the poles for a long time. In recent times, after World War II, when the Nazis in 1938 went down there and discovered in the ice caves some UFOs and tried to back engineer the technology, which of course, if they had been able to successfully do that, we could have lost World War II. After the war was over, the Allies sent Admiral Richard Byrd, who was a 33-degree Mason, down to the South Pole to see if he could find the Nazis that had escaped and, vanquish them. And he had encounters with inner Earth beings that were positive, but also those Nazis had managed to get the small, UFO spaceships disc, and they basically destroyed his aerial fleet and sent him going back to the US. All this was covered up because, of course, this was technology we could not duplicate, and we did not want to scare the bejeebers out of everybody on the planet after 6 years of, World War II. So there's a lot to say about, Downcraft and these civilizations there. This isn't the presentation for it, but I just want to plant those seeds for all of you to know that we are not alone, and we've never been alone. And there are some very beautiful, advanced, high spiritual beings that are working for the evolution of this planet, and have continued to do so even when we were in our dark ages of destruction. So what are the other places where Atlantis could be? Well, some have speculated it was in the Mediterranean, and certainly the Mediterranean is a very ancient area with Greece and Italy and Egypt and many wonderful civilizations, Persia, all of that there. But it really wasn't in the Aegean. But the place that they've looked at the most was an island called Thera. And just to give you an idea, you can sort of see this is Crete. And this is sort of where Thera was. And Thera has all the same rock formations that Atlantis has, the black, white, and red stones. But there was a huge volcanic explosion in 1600 BC. And this has created a cloud cover. This is what created that big famine in Egypt that, we hear about in the Bible, where Moses, like there's a famine and the frogs and, the 7 things that supposedly Egypt's curse. Well, that whole area was getting the drought and the famine because of the huge dark cloud cover from the ash. And that really came from Thera's eruption. Today, this is what the island looks like. It's like a half moon with a little bitty sun. I've been there. It's very cool. A lot of painters, a lot of cool artists, beautiful. It's called Santorini. So that's where the volcano once was that went off, and it's dormant now. But there are ruins all under here, and you can kind of snorkel if you want to. So was Atlantis in Bimini? Okay, Edgar Cayce, if you remember, who was quite amazing and prolific, predicted that a part of Atlantis would rise off the coast of Bimini. And certainly in 1968, this underwater road appeared, and snorkelers found it. And this is kind of a drawing of it. And these are gigantic stones. You can sort of see, look at the diver. I mean, his entire body is like the length of one of the stones. And what's interesting about these stones is they're made of granite, and granite does not appear on that island. Granite is a very hard stone. What's there is limestone, which is a water stone, very porous. So somebody had to have brought these stones and laid them down in what appeared to either be a road or a harbor dock. So this was a part of Atlantis. Very, very long ago. But Atlantis went through 4 different incarnations, from about 100,000 to about 51,000 years ago. It was one large landmass that went all the way over, and then a huge misuse of energy happened, and it broke up into sections.